I am on my menstrual cycle this week. I am only on day 2 and I am feeling sluggish. I'm tired. I have obviously less energy right now and I just want to chill and eat all the yummy foods. And it has me, catching my own habits, my own behaviors, my triggers during this time of month. And so I'm kind of trying to realign myself with my own energy and where I need to be putting it. So I figured this would be another good reason why we needed to talk about this, because some people aren't even aware that cycle syncing is a thing. And a cycle syncing essentially is just taking the reality that is our hormone health as a woman, right? Like we have cycles, we have menstrual cycles every 28 to 32 days, right? Like we are going through different phases of hormones, which changes our energy and our moods and our diet and what we want to prioritize. So many things are affected by our menstrual cycles. Hey, I'm your host, Dr. Desiree Cassell. I'm an orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapist specializing in women's health, aka pelvic floor. I'm a wife, mom of 3, foodie, lover of all things movement and nature, and I'm super passionate about educating, empowering, and supporting other women like you to find and maintain balance throughout all aspects of their lives, without pain, pressure, or peeing their pants. And this is the Balanced Momtality Podcast, where we will talk about all things pelvic floor, your core, and optimizing your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum recovery, providing you with the knowledge and tools so that you can feel like the strong, playful, and happy mom that you and your family deserve. Now let's get you out of those pads and back to loving movement. Fill up your water, pop in those AirPods, roll out your mat, and let's connect. Before we start today's episode, just a quick disclaimer that anything mentioned in this podcast is not meant to treat or diagnose any medical conditions. If you have any questions or concerns about your healthcare needs, please seek the care of your medical provider. This is also a safe space where we will be talking about very sensitive but important topics, such as issues with peeing and pooping, relationships, and even sex. So if you have littles around, probably a good idea to pop those AirPods in. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hey girlfriend, thanks so much for showing up to listen to the Balanced Momtality podcast. It really does mean a lot. I hope that these episodes inspire you, motivate you, and just inform you on all things women's health. And on that note, we are diving into cycle syncing today. I thought this would be appropriate for a couple reasons this week. One is I've been having this conversation with my patients a lot lately, and that usually is a sign from the universe that it's time to make this an episode, because if my patients are needing this information, I'm sure there are so many other women out there also looking and seeking this information out. The other reason is because I am on my menstrual cycle this week. I am only on day 2 and I am feeling sluggish. I'm tired. I have obviously less energy right now and I just want to chill and eat all the yummy foods. And it has me, catching my own habits, my own behaviors, my triggers during this time of month. And so I'm kind of trying to realign myself with my own energy and where I need to be putting it. So I figured this would be another good reason why we needed to talk about this, because some people aren't even aware that cycle syncing is a thing. And a cycle syncing essentially is just taking the reality that is our hormone health as a woman, right? Like we have cycles, we have menstrual cycles every 28 to 32 days, right? Like we are going through different phases of hormones, which changes our energy and our moods and our diet and what we want to prioritize. So many things are affected by our menstrual cycles. And I don't know about you, but I just think it's so funny if you guys have seen one of those memes floating around or like TikTok videos where it's, this woman who is like me for the 537,000th time, realizing that, my mood and my mom rage and my binge eating and all of that was implemented by my cycle or affected by my cycle. And it's like your cycle shows up and it's like, oh yeah, that explains a lot, even though at this point I should know this stuff already. I should already be proactively treating, in a sense, your cycle and how your body is going to feel. And that way you can set yourself up for success, or more importantly, take away that sense of failure. Because I know for me personally, around this time of the month, I just feel like a failure, like, to be honest, because all I want to do is sit on the couch and binge the TV and eat the ice cream and eat all the things, and I don't care. It's like, whatever. But I know, knowing what I know, that doesn't support me in the best way. That actually is going to make my cramps worse and make my mood and energy worse. And so, yes, there obviously so many reasons why it's okay to sit on the couch and do nothing. And being on your menstrual cycle is definitely a good reason to do nothing. But there's a balance, right? And so we can be proactive if we are looking ahead at our cycle, looking ahead at our to-dos, at our exercise, at our nutrition, and just adjust things a little differently so that we can feel our best and show up our best despite being on that menstrual cycle phase. So let's just review a little bit about what those phases are and a little bit about each phase and what they mean. And then we'll dive into more what this should look like moving forward throughout the month with your exercise and nutrition and all of that. So if we start at the menstrual phase, which is usually when you're looking at your cycle, we're starting at that menstrual phase where this is when you're bleeding, right? Like, this is when all of your hormones drop. And because of that low level of hormones running through your body, this is why your energy is low, and you probably feel less motivation and you're just more fatigued and tired. And it's like, this is why I just want to sit on the couch, which again is fine. As we'll talk about in a little bit, rest is one of the biggest things that we should be prioritizing during our menstrual cycle. And so we'll dive more into that. But after our menstrual phase, we have our follicular phase. And the follicular phase is when those eggs are getting ready to ovulate. They're getting ready to come out of that fallopian tube, right? So our estrogen and our follicular stimulating hormone, or our FSH, is also rising. So estrogen and FSH are on the rise, which is why you start to get energy back in this follicular phase. You get more motivation and creativity around this phase. And so this is where we start to feel a little bit better, and this leads into that ovulation. So ovulation being when those eggs are being released and coming through the uterus and out that vaginal canal, right? And this is because our hormones have peaked. So we've got the peak of all of our hormones at this time, giving us the most energy around this time. We also can have a lot more motivation and better mood and just so much more energy, and we should feel our best around ovulation. However, because of this increase in all of those hormones and because we're releasing an egg, there's also a big peak in our circulation and more blood flow around our ovulation phase. So while menstrual phase is also where obviously we're bleeding, so there's a lot of blood flow, ovulation also causes a lot of blood flow. So while ovulation might be when you're the most energetic and you have the most hormones and you're feeling your best, because of this ovulation or peak in estrogen around this phase and peak in circulation, we can also see some other things that aren't as comfortable. So while ovulation, you should technically or theoretically feel your best, I actually personally don't feel great during ovulation with my pelvic vein issues because I have more blood around that time of the month. And so therefore my vessels that are already dilated get stretched out. And so I kind of feel like I have cysts because my I don't have cysts, but it feels like a sharp ovarian pain around ovulation because of the increased blood flow. But you might also get ovulation pain that can seem similar. And so with my pelvic venous disorder, which is again kind of varicose veins around the ovarian, the ovaries, the ovarian vessels are varicose essentially and stretched out. It mimics ovulation pain or a cyst pain when truly it's just a stretching of that vein wall, and that's pretty painful. And so we'll talk a little bit on what that means for exercise and stuff, but just a little side note on pelvic venous disorder and a reason why you might not actually feel your best during ovulation. But that last phase leading into our menstrual cycle after ovulation is that luteal phase. And our luteal phase is actually kind of long. So remember, with ovulation, you are releasing an egg, but that's not necessarily even though we've got these 4 phases, menstrual, follicular, ovulation, and luteal, they're not necessarily all just 1 week long, right? We like to chunk it up into 4 weeks and 4 pieces and try to make life be black and white, but that's just not the reality. So this is where it can be just so helpful to just stay in tune with your body and how you're feeling, because that will probably give you a much better idea of what phase you're truly in, as opposed to just thinking, oh, this is my 4th week, so I'm in the luteal phase. So just kind of think about how you're feeling, because as that you're going into that luteal phase, coming out of ovulation, you'll probably start with some decent energy in the beginning of that luteal phase. But then as progesterone starts to rise and your estrogen starts to drop, getting ready for the menstrual cycle, you'll start to feel that sluggish energy like your menstrual phase. So you really can have kind of a mixed luteal phase where you have more energy in the beginning and then it starts to dwindle towards the end. So keeping that in mind, again, how are you feeling, and really honoring that energy as you decide to do your to-do list and you set out your week and what exercises you want to do and all of that stuff. So with that being said, let's talk about what this all means in terms of syncing for exercise and what should we do. So with that menstrual cycle, we'll start over there at the menstrual cycle again with those low hormones, meaning low energy. This means rest, and you really do need to rest in this phase. So sleep is super crucial, but even naps and just gentle activity. Don't plan a lot of hikes and workout classes and high intensity classes during this phase, or you will feel sluggish during them. I still go to my classes during this time of month, my high fitness class, which is obviously a high intensity class, but I am not doing the jumping jacks or the burpees or the tuck jumps or anything that's super intense during this phase. Because one, I just don't feel like it. I just don't feel good, right? Jumping does not feel good when you're on your menstrual cycle. And so that's when I'm tapping it out, right? I am just tapping. I'm not doing the jumping jack. I'm just squatting instead of doing a burpee. So we can still, it doesn't mean, oh, I just missed the class or don't go with my friend or whatever it is. Just modify it a little bit and honor your body where it's at. But the better types of exercise to really prioritize this time of month is the breath work and gentle restorative yoga. So if you've worked with me at all or listened to this podcast at all, you already know how great the breath work is and how many magical things it does for the body. And so it really calms the nervous system. It helps stretch out tight tissues, and it really, really helps with menstrual cramps, because a lot of times those menstrual cramps, while yes, the uterus is inflamed and large and heavy, that all increases the tone in the pelvic floor, because the pelvic floor is now holding more up. It's a heavier organ that it has to hold up, and it's also sensing all of that inflammation, and it also has less estrogen and other hormones as well. So it's not as flexible. It stays tighter during this time of month. And so that breath work or the cramps can really be coming a lot of times from the tightness in our pelvic floor. And by releasing and making sure our pelvic floor isn't cramped and tight throughout that menstrual phase, we can have a significant reduction in cramping. And so breath work and gentle yoga is great because it can help stretch and lengthen those tight tissues and help manage some of those back aches and menstrual cramp hip pains that you might be getting around this time of month, which is why also walking and gentle walking is so nice to take advantage of during this menstrual phase, just to get some gentle mobility, keep things from cramping up. But just remember, prioritize rest. But where's that balance? Are you sitting on the couch all day long? Maybe you should get up and take a gentle walk. Or if you're really feeling down and out and you don't even have the energy for that, just do some gentle breath work and cat-cow. Sit back into child's pose and just stretch a little bit. It really can be a big game changer for how you're feeling during this week. But going into our follicular phase, where that estrogen and our hormones are starting to rise, we're getting more energy. This is where we can really start to increase more strength training and focusing on getting heavy lifting in. And this can really be helpful to our joints and our muscles during this time of month. And hopefully we're getting more energy that we can really push weight. And let's do our best to take advantage of that energy starting to rise and start to pick up a little bit more moderate level cardio activity. Maybe you're going swimming or on a long hike or starting to do some strength training, really focusing on form here and just really pushing that energy as it starts to return. But it might not be there right away, so don't feel like you have to go hard right as soon as your menstrual cycle ends. Again, listen to your body and how it feels, but that energy should continue to rise. So as it rises with those hormone levels rising and we get into our ovulation phase where, like I mentioned before, I do have the most energy around my ovulation phase. Towards the end of my follicular and beginning of ovulation phase, I really feel my best. I have no pain and my energy is really up there. So this is when I am going to my high class and doing the burpees and the tuck jumps, and I feel really, really good. But as I get closer to truly ovulating, and I can usually feel like, oh, yep, it's this side and it's ovulation time right now. Because of my vein issues, I have a lot more pain and heaviness in my pelvic floor during this phase. So while the week before I might have felt fine and did those high intensity burpees and everything else, during my ovulation phase, personally, I stopped doing that. And I might squat, I might even do the burpee, but not the tuck jump. It just depends on how I feel and how much heaviness because of that blood flow I'm truly having. But otherwise, taking advantage of this time, if you don't have any pain during this ovulation phase and you are feeling great, this is when we want to do the HIIT classes and spin classes and more vigorous exercise because you have that energy. And the higher estrogen also means that we do have, more blood flow through our body, and our estrogen does create some extra lengthening and flexibility and laxity in our tissues, which can be good, but also can be tricky because if you have things like prolapse, for example, where those tissue or the soft tissue that's holding those pelvic organs up is stretched out, you might feel more of that heaviness and pressure during ovulation. So if this is you might not want to do that high intensity impact exercise around ovulation because you might be feeling good, but just knowing that your tissues are more stretchy, you can be more prone to prolapse symptoms if you're doing high impact things like that. So just something to take into consideration. But if you're not having any heaviness or pressure or anything like that, then by all means, mama, go jump, go do the HIIT class, go do spin, go do all the fun things and take advantage of that energy peak. Because as it starts to dwindle off in our luteal phase, this is when we do want to start modifying things again and remember, this luteal phase can be kind of long. So the first half, you might start out with a high energy and wanting to continue with those vigorous exercises. And then by the second half, you might already be feeling moody and tired and not have all of the energy. And so this is where you might go to lighter weights and not really pushing it with supersets and really heavy weight. Or maybe you're going back to just tapping out those jumping jacks, or not even doing jumping jacks at all, and maybe or not even going to classes, and maybe you're just walking and doing some gentle yoga. This is a-okay, even if you're doing high intensity during your menstrual cycle or low intensity during ovulation, if that's what feels good for you. So I know we're talking about syncing our exercise and fitness with our cycles based on hormones and energy and all of that, but it's how you feel. So if you feel up to doing the high intensity stuff, even if it's during your menstrual cycle, go for it. If you feel like resting, even if it's during your ovulation phase, go for it. But with that being said, if you're noticing more phases are you're tired, you're fatigued, you're not really having more good days than bad, then that's where we want to reassess, because you might not be supporting yourself. You might be overdoing it during those periods that you are supposed to be resting, or maybe you're not fueling yourself enough. So that's the other thing we want to take into account. Definitely rest, because if you're not getting enough sleep, I don't care if your hormones are high during ovulation, you're still going to feel like crap. So sleep and rest is important, especially during our menstrual phase and that end of luteal phase where our hormones are dropping, and we need to honor that, because if you're really pushing through, your body might take a hit when it's supposed to be feeling good. But on the other end with nutrition, that can be a huge thing. So especially during that menstrual cycle, we need all the iron. So really thinking about things like red meats and dark leafy vegetables. We need more vitamin C and omega-3s. So trying to get in, bell peppers and citrus foods and walnuts, chia seeds. These can all be really beneficial during that menstrual cycle. And then going into that follicular cycle to help support those eggs and everything else that's happening to get ready for ovulation, things like fermented foods can be really helpful. Kefirs, kimchi, sauerkraut. Zinc is super supportive. So red meats, chickpeas, things like that. And so just start eating all of the leafy greens, fruits and veggies. Make sure we're getting those micronutrients in. And as we're going into that ovulation phase, continuing with those dark leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, cabbage. Healthy fats are great during this time of month as well. So avocado and olive oil and salmon and nuts, walnuts, super, super supportive during our ovulation phase. Fiber can also really be helpful to keep our gut health on track during this time of month. So beans and legumes, pears, flax seeds, just really trying to get in enough fiber here. Chia seeds are great. And as we head into that luteal phase, which is going to be a phase where we're both supporting a little bit of ovulation, but also getting ready for that menstrual cycle, looking at vitamin B6 is really big here. So salmon and eggs, potatoes, carrots, all good sources of B6, and then potassium. So getting in those micronutrients, so important, both B6 and potassium, with bananas and spinach and beans, super helpful with some fiber there. Complex carbs keep our insulin levels low or managed and more balanced, so we're not having high spikes. So sweet potatoes and squash, whole grains. This is where we can balance that blood sugar and keep our hormones healthy and more balanced as we go into that menstrual cycle, so that we don't have as intense of a dive on those hormones. And so just keeping that nutritional piece in mind, because we do want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to just supplement and helping our natural hormone excretion, toxin excretion, hormone balance system stay on par. So I know I was a little all over the place with the fitness and the nutrition pieces being separate, but hopefully overall you get the gist, and you can always look and listen to this episode again. I know my words are a little hard today and I'm stuttering a little bit more, so please excuse me because my brain, being on my menstrual cycle, isn't as clear right now. So words are hard. Words are hard for me today and probably this week. So just a recap, make sure that you are staying in tune to your body, really honoring where you're at when it comes to your energy and where your cycle is. And then just reassess if things don't seem right and you're not having energy when you should and you're feeling sluggish and behind. We want to make sure that we are doing what we can, both nutritionally, with sleep and activity, to help support and optimize our energy and how we feel, and also our hormones throughout our menstrual cycle, that whole month period. So there's so much more I want to learn on this. This is really just the basics that I've learned so far through different coursework and practitioners that I've talked with. And so I at some point do plan on having a hormone doctor or cycle syncing coach on here to just help give us more tips on this, because I think this is just such an awesome mindset, right? Like we can sync our cycles and feel like we have control over them versus the cycle having control over us, and then going, oh yeah, I'm bleeding. No wonder I feel like crap. No wonder I'm eating all the chocolate and ice cream, right? Instead of going, hey, my menstrual phase is starting next week. Let's make sure I've prepped correct foods. I'm not over planning my schedule, because if you over plan during those times where you have low energy, you will feel like you failed because you set yourself up for failure packing too much in. Whereas during that ovulation phase, pack it all in, do all the things, start the new projects, because you'll have the creativity and the drive and the energy and the motivation to do it. So it's not just about doing the right things, but are you doing the right things at the right times? I hope this just got you thinking and just inspired to start looking into all things cycle syncing, because I know I am. And if you have any other questions or any tips for us and my community, please come over to the Balanced Momtality Wellness and Support and let us know, or ask that question over there and I'd be happy to help. That is a community there for you. So I'd love to have you show up over there and say hi. And also, just if you can, please leave me a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. It really just helps this information get spread so other women can take control of their health and help restore and balance all things in their lives. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I can't wait to chat with you here next week on the Balanced Momtality podcast. Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you've got so many other important things going on, but I hope it was helpful and you leave here with some tools to help you in your healing journey. And I just want to ask you, if you have found this helpful, to please leave a review on iTunes. Scroll down to the bottom of my podcast page and leave that 5-star review so it can help other women see this information. And also, if you want to be a part of my community of amazing women trying to balance all the things, great tips and insight and sharing stories and just motivating each other along the way, feel free to join my Facebook group, The Balanced Momtality Wellness and Support. I hope to see you here next time on the Balanced Momtality podcast.